Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but not good night. There's no better way to explain the difference between B2 and C1 than with an example. Steps to follow to be carried out will not be mentioned as this video is for Spanish speaking people. So if you're deciding to take the C1 exam, probably you have learned these steps already. However, B2 exercises are very similar to C1 ones. You can always go to my B2 section where they are all explained. Are going to explain them one by one, except the cross-text multiple matching. As it is not included in B2, I will dedicate a full video to it. So let's begin comparing both so you can see visually the difference. First of all, let's remember B2, pay attention to the language, grade of difficulty, and the amount of words. And now let's see the multiple choice. Now let's compare it to C1 and of course the multiple choices too. So as you see, there's visually a great difference between them, but don't worry because it's the same difference between B1 and B2. So we know it's all about perseverance, practice, and learning from mistakes. Let's see the first one, multiple choice. When I say stop, stop the recording to read it as the differences are explained comparing this section of a B2 reading to another one, which is C1 level. Stop. The arguments, as you see, are clear, direct, and easy to understand. They go straight to the point in a clear and logical manner. Therefore, there is a direct comprehension, so the understanding is immediately and clearly without needing extra explanation, interpretation, or analysis. Now let's compare this to the C1. Stop the recording in order to read it as before. Stop. In C1, the meaning is implied with subtle arguments. Therefore, it is not directly said, but is gently suggested, and readers must read between the lines. Colors can have different associations in different parts of the world, and it's said in this way. Colors is first and foremost a social phenomenon. Social. There is no transcultural truth or color perception. In B2, when locating a specific information, it has basic deductions. In C1, there are not basic, but you have to interpret complex details in context. For example, if you're reading a novel and the character suddenly says something strange, you don't analyze his expression in isolation, but what you do is take into account what has happened, the character's emotions, the setting, etc. So in C1, we can say that we focus on what does the text mean, as it has to be interpreted. What does the text say, as there's a direct comprehension that leads to basic deductions. Let's pay attention to the distractors, which are obvious if you read them, and they are easier to spot, of course, comparing them to C1. One of them is half-truth, in which they are partly correct but not fully. For example, in this one, the concern of the actors. The actors are present with a group of actors, but nothing is made reference about their concern. Irrelevant information, making reference that details are not mentioned in the text. For example, a critical attitude from Kate. Of course, the misinterpretation of a single word, in this case, it would be reassure in C. The distractors in C1 are very subtle. Therefore, what it means is that they are not obvious. They are hard to notice, so it's easy to be misled by them. For example, entire options seem correct unless analyzed carefully. It is very important to learn to analyze them quickly as time is of the essence in reading exams, and this can only be achieved through practice. Answers seem true but aren't the main point because in the multiple choice they might contain information that is based on the text, but they don't directly answer the question being asked. In this case, what problem regarding color does the writer explain in the first paragraph? Be careful in the paraphrase strap, as in the multiple choice, an idea is changed from the original text. It doesn't copy it exactly, but says something very similar. But the trap is so tiny that it is easy to be tricked, and if you're not careful, you fall into it. They use similar words but wrong meaning, which creates confusion and misunderstanding. For example, effect, affect, complement, complement. So, as a review, we can say B2 focus on facts, and in C1 focus on interpretation, analyzing arguments. So it's more based in intuition, in self-confidence that you have the knowledge to interpret it correctly, which can only be obtained by practice. The structures are more obvious in B2, very subtle in C1. I hope now it's clearer the difference between B2 and C1 in the first reading, multiple choice. And as I always say, is theory important? Of course it is. But practice is essential in order to make all the mistakes practicing so we do not make them during the official exam. Bye bye.